I rented a room from a woman named Mrs. Colby in 1968. Looking back, I wasn't renting a room. I was walking into a trap. It was the fall of 1968. I was 22 years old, 3 weeks into my first real job at an insurance office downtown, and I had nowhere to live. My cousin's couch had a 2-week limit, and I was already on day 19. So every morning before work, I'd grab the classifieds from the corner newsstand, a dime on the counter, and circle anything under $60 a month. Most of the ads were the usual thing: a landlord's name, a phone number, maybe a line about utilities. But one Tuesday, there was a listing that looked different. Furnished room, quiet street, female tenant preferred. Ask for Mrs. Colby. No calls after 8. No address, no price. Just a phone number with a downtown exchange, the kind where you still had to give the operator 2 letters and 5 numbers to get through. I called during my lunch break from the phone booth outside a nearby diner. I dropped in a dime, dialed the number on the rotary phone, and waited. A woman answered on the second ring, almost like she'd been expecting my call. She sounded kind and polite, like the older women I grew up around. She told me the room was only $35 a month, much cheaper than anything else I'd found. Then she gave me the address on Delford Street, past the rail yard, and asked me to come by around 7 that evening, before it got dark. I remember thinking $35 was too good to be true, and I remember deciding not to care. Delford Street didn't feel like a real street. It looked more like an old road that everyone had forgotten. The farther I drove, the fewer houses there were. By the end, only 3 houses were left, with empty fields between them. Mrs. Colby's house was the last one. It was a tall, 2-story white house with a wraparound porch. A single light above the front door was already on, even though it wasn't dark yet. I parked my station wagon on the gravel road and sat there for a few seconds. There were no other cars outside. Most of the house was dark, except for a warm yellow light shining from a room in the back. Even from outside, it felt like someone was waiting for me. Mrs. Colby answered the door before I even made it up the steps. She was maybe 60, gray hair pinned up neat, wearing a house dress with a cardigan over it, even though it was a warm evening. She smiled at me like she already knew me, which struck me as a little strange for a total stranger. But I told myself some people are just naturally warm like that. "You must be the girl who called," she said, holding the screen door open. "Come in before the bugs do." Inside, it smelled like my grandmother's house. Furniture polish and something underneath it I couldn't quite place yet. The front room had a sofa with the plastic slipcover still on it, a wood television cabinet with rabbit ear antennas, and a mantel clock ticking loud enough to hear from the doorway. The floor was checkerboard tile, waxed to a shine. Everything was spotless, almost too spotless, like a room nobody actually used. "The room's upstairs," she said, "but sit a minute first. Can I get you some tea?" I said sure, mostly just to be polite, and she disappeared into the kitchen. While she was gone, I took a better look around the front room. There was a framed photo on the side table, a young woman about my age, standing in front of what looked like this same porch. The photo had a strip of tape along the bottom, like it had been pulled out of an album and never put back. When Mrs. Colby came back with the tea, I pointed to the photo. "Who's that?" I asked. She set the cup down and smiled. "My niece," she said. "She used to rent this room before you." "What happened to her?" "Oh, she moved away," Mrs. Colby said. "Girls your age never stay in one place for very long." She smiled again, but this time something felt different. The smile looked forced, and there was something cold in her eyes. At the time, I didn't think much about it. Looking back, I wish I had. She walked me up a narrow staircase that creaked on every third step, into a hallway with 3 closed doors and one open one at the end. The open one was the room for rent. A twin bed, a dresser, a small closet, a window looking out over the field behind the house. The wallpaper had a faded floral pattern, roses gone the color of weak coffee. Clean, made up nice, curtains hung straight. Nothing wrong with it at all. "The bathroom's there," she said, pointing to one of the closed doors. "This room is mine." Then she pointed to the last door, the one closest to my room. "That's the storage room. I'd ask you not to go in there. Most of my late husband's things are still inside. I just haven't had the heart to go through them." That seemed reasonable enough. Everybody's got a room like that. I told her I'd take it, and she looked genuinely pleased. More pleased than a $35 room should have made anyone. She said I could move in Saturday, and that she only asked 2 things of her tenants: quiet after 9, and always let her know if I'd be out past midnight so she wouldn't worry. Walking back down the stairs, I noticed something I'd missed on the way up. A second lock on the outside of the storage room door. A heavy brass padlock. Not the kind you'd use to keep your late husband's things safe from burglars. The kind you'd use to keep something in. I told myself it was nothing. People get particular about their belongings. I moved in that Saturday with 1 suitcase and a hat box of records. Mrs. Colby helped me carry things up, chatting the whole way about the neighborhood, about a bakery 2 miles down with good coffee cake, about how happy she was that I'd like it there. She seemed, if anything, a little too eager for company. I remember thinking that was sad more than strange. A woman alone in a big house, no husband anymore, a niece who'd moved on. Of course, she wanted somebody around. The first few nights were fine. Better than fine. Quiet, clean, cheap. I'd come home from the insurance office, eat dinner with her most nights, because she always made too much and insisted I not let it go to waste, and then go up to my room and read or write letters to my mother by lamplight. I'd seal them with a lick of the envelope and drop them in the mailbox at the corner the next morning. It was the 4th night that something first felt off, though I couldn't have told you why at the time. I was coming back from the bathroom around 11, and I heard something behind the storage room door. A shuffling sound, low, like fabric dragging across a floor. I stood there in the hallway a second, telling myself it was just the house settling or a draft moving something. Old houses make noises. I grew up in one. But then the sound stopped, all at once, the way a sound stops when something realizes it's being listened to. I went back to my room and didn't sleep well. The next morning, I mentioned it to a girl I worked with, Carol, mostly as a funny story. Old lady, spooky, locked room, probably just mice. Carol laughed. Then she got quiet and said her mother used to live out that way years back, and that there'd been talk about a family on Delford Street. Nothing specific, just talk. There was a girl who used to walk to school every day. Then one year she disappeared, and nobody at church would ever talk about what happened to her. I didn't think much of it at the time. Small towns always have talk like that about somebody. That evening, Mrs. Colby asked, very casually, over pot roast, whether I had family who'd be checking in on me. Whether anybody knew exactly where I was living now. I said sure, my mother had the address, my cousin too. She nodded, seemed satisfied, and changed the subject to the weather and the baseball game on TV that night. It was such a small thing, but I noticed she'd asked it exactly the way you'd ask a question you already needed the answer to. Not the way you'd ask out of simple curiosity. 3 more days passed, ordinary days mostly, but small things kept piling up, the way pebbles collect in a shoe until eventually you have to stop and shake it out. I found a second toothbrush in the bathroom cup, still in its paper wrapper, a brand I didn't recognize and hadn't bought. I found a woman's shoe under the dresser in my room. a size too small for me, worn down at the heel like someone had walked a lot of miles in it. And one afternoon, coming home early because the office closed for a plumbing problem, I found the storage room door standing open. Just a few inches, the padlock hanging loose and unlatched on the hasp. I should have kept walking. I know that now. Every person who's ever heard this story tells me that. But I was 22 and curious, and it was the middle of the day. Sunlight coming through the hallway window, and Mrs. Colby's car wasn't in the driveway. I pushed the door open. It wasn't a storage room, not really. There was a single bed against the far wall, made up neat with a quilt, and a small dresser, and a mirror with a chip in one corner. On top of the dresser sat a hairbrush with long dark hair still tangled in the bristles. A stack of letters sat beside it, tied with string, addressed to a name I didn't recognize, in handwriting that wasn't Mrs. Colby's careful cursive. Younger handwriting, rounder. And on the wall above the bed, taped up in neat rows, were Polaroids, the square kind with the white borders. A dozen of them, maybe more. All young women, all standing on the front porch of this same house, the same bare bulb overhead, the same slightly stiff smile. I didn't recognize any of them, but I recognized the pose. It was the exact way Mrs. Colby had asked me to stand for a photo on my second night. For her album, she'd said, laughing, telling me she liked to remember all her girls. I heard the front door open downstairs. I didn't think. I pulled the storage room door shut as quiet as I could, latched the padlock back the way it had been, and walked fast and silent back to my own room, my heart going so hard I could feel it in my teeth. Mrs. Colby called up the stairs a minute later, asking if I was home, her voice as warm and ordinary as it had been every day since I moved in. I called back that I was, that I'd just gotten in myself, and my voice came out steadier than I had any right to expect. That night at dinner, she was exactly the same as always. Asked about my day, complained about the price of ground beef, offered me seconds on the pot roast. I sat there, eating a meal cooked by a woman I now believed had done something to at least one girl who'd slept in the room I was sleeping in. And I smiled and said it was delicious, because I didn't know yet what she was capable of. And I wasn't about to find out by accusing her to her face. I told her I was tired and went up early. I didn't sleep. I lay on top of the covers, fully dressed, my suitcase already packed and pushed under the bed, waiting for the house to go still. Around midnight, I heard her moving in the hallway. Slow steps, deliberate, stopping outside my door. I lay there, frozen, watching the strip of hallway light under the door, waiting for the knob to turn. It didn't. After a long minute, the steps moved on, toward the storage room. I heard the padlock click open, and then her voice, low, talking to someone. Or something. Or maybe just to the empty room. I couldn't make out the words. I didn't want to. I waited until I heard her bedroom door close again, and made myself count to 500 before I moved. Getting out wasn't simple. The stairs creaked on the third step, same as always, and I knew it well enough by then to skip it entirely, easing my weight from the second step straight to the fourth, one hand flat against the wall the whole way down. The front door had a chain lock I hadn't noticed being used before, and it was fastened now, top and bottom. My fingers were shaking so bad it took 3 tries to work it loose without letting it clatter against the frame. I got the door open. I got myself onto the porch, into that bare bulb's light, and I made myself walk, not run, across the gravel toward my car. Some part of my brain that was still thinking clearly knew that running would carry farther in that quiet than walking would. I was backing out of the driveway. No headlights on yet when I saw her, standing in the front window, watching me. Not rushing outside, not calling my name, just watching, perfectly still, the way you'd watch something you already knew you'd get back eventually. I didn't turn my headlights on until I hit the main road. I drove straight to the police station and told them everything. To their credit, they took me seriously faster than I expected. Two officers went out to the house that night in their black and white Plymouth. Mrs. Colby answered the door, same as always, invited them in for coffee off her percolator, showed them the storage room herself without even being asked. By the time they got there, it was empty. Bed stripped, dresser cleared, not a Polaroid or a hairbrush in sight. She told them it was simply where she kept her late husband's things, and that maybe the new girl had gotten spooked by an old house and an overactive imagination. And wasn't that a shame, considering how much she'd enjoyed the company? There was nothing to charge her with. No crime in a locked room. No crime in a photograph that wasn't there anymore. About a week later, Detective Halloran came to see me at the insurance office. He sat on the edge of my desk and told me what he was about to say wasn't part of the official investigation. Over the previous 6 years, 4 different young women had rented rooms from Mrs. Colby. Each time, she used a different name and a different address, all within 40 miles of Delford Street. According to Halloran, every one of those women had supposedly moved away. They always left suddenly, usually in the middle of the night. After that, nobody ever saw or heard from them again. The strange part was that no one ever came looking for them. Their families believed the girls had simply started a new life somewhere else. By the time anyone began asking questions, Mrs. Colby had already vanished under another name. He asked me if I remembered giving her my mother's address. I had, over dinner the second week. She'd asked, very casually, whether I wanted to mail her a letter for me sometime, save me the trip to the post office since she was headed that way herself. I called my mother from the station that same night, the desk sergeant letting me use his phone. She was fine. No strange calls, no visitors. But I never fully believed after that it was only luck that kept it that way. I never learned who the girl in that first photograph was. The one in the frame in the front room, the night I arrived. The one Mrs. Colby called her niece. Detective Halloran told me the house changed hands 11 months later, sold quietly to a family from out of state who had no idea what they'd bought, and that Mrs. Colby herself seemed to simply stop existing under that name after that. No forwarding address, no new listing. 3 years ago, while going through boxes at my mother's house, I found an old newspaper clipping tucked between some papers. It was a classified ad from a town I'd never lived in, printed 2 years after I left Delford Street. Furnished room, quiet street, female tenant preferred. Ask for Mrs. Colby. No calls after 8. I stared at it for a long time. I don't know if Mrs. Colby is still alive. I don't know if she ever used that name again. But I still wonder if, somewhere in another small town, another young woman saw that same ad and thought she'd found the perfect place to live.